It's Alyssa and welcome back to my channel, The Divine Venus. And today we are going to be talking about Placidus and whole sign astrology. Now, I've talked about this a couple times in the last videos, but I just wanted to kind of give an entire video just to this idea and try to keep it as simple and short as possible. And to create it as simple as possible, I actually made a TikTok, so I will transport you now. Let's talk about Holstein versus Placidus in astrology. Holstein is one of the oldest forms of astrology, and actually you've probably been utilizing it even when you weren't into astrology. And that's because things like cosmopolitan horoscopes will utilize Holstein because it's even across the board for every single person. Placidus changes things up a little bit. It becomes more psychological and more emotional. You can read a lot more about the purpose in a native when you get into Placidus because you're getting into those very big, fine-tuned, pinpointed points. I'm totally into using both, but here's some things you might want to know about. In Holstein, the MC or midheaven or medium coli, which means middle of the sky, is not in the middle of the sky. Therefore, it cannot tell you the purpose or the reach of the native. In Placidus, the middle of the sky is always the middle of the sky, showing your directive. In Holstein, the ascendant or the rising is not actually where you're rising. Any planets that fall before your rising actually still fall in your first house, which means they are conscious to you. In Placidus, anything that falls before you rise is unconscious, dream world, dream state. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted a reason to use this. Placidus became widely used in the 17th century. So realistically, Placidus is a newer form of astrology. Holstein has been around for a couple thousand years, actually, like since astrology was invented. The houses were not shifted due to any mathematical equation. The houses just fell with the signs. So if you were a Pisces rising, Pisces would be your entire first house. If you were a Taurus rising, Taurus would be your entire first house. And then your second house, third house, fourth house would follow in that. There'd be no interceptions. Equal houses will have every house be the same exact equal length, equal distance, but it will still fall at the ascendant and the midheaven. So equal is closer to, say, Placidus. So most people, if they're doing Placidus, might switch to equal sometimes, especially if they're getting too far into the poles, because if you get too far north or too far south, the Placidus charts start to look a little insane. Holstein doesn't even deal with this. Now, the biggest criticism of Holstein from us modern astrologers is that in Holstein astrology, the midheaven, and which is the medium coli, which means the middle of the sky, can fall between the 8th and the 11th houses. That means that it doesn't carry the energy of the 9th to the 10th house, meaning it doesn't hold as much value as being that zenith place of purpose. It's more like free floating energy. So then you have to read it in the house that it is, which takes a little bit away from the idea of it being the middle of the sky. The medium coli, it's an important piece in Holstein, obviously, but it doesn't fall in what makes sense. I'm not criticizing this personally. This is just the criticisms of it. Same with the ascendant, the rising. This is your place at birth. This is where you should set off your entire life, right? Like you rise at the rising and then you move forward. So the house after the rising should be all of anything that falls after you rise. But in Holstein, that rising could be anywhere within the first house. It could be at the end, as mine is, because it's 26 degrees, or if you had a 0-degree rising, it would start with the whole signs. So that means that things that are in your unconscious sphere before the rising in Holstein actually fall in your conscious sphere in the first house. So it becomes less psychological. And that is what I've seen across the board, is that Holstein is less psychological than Placidus. And psychology is not a new thing. Psychology, though, was treated more recently after the Dark Ages, reinvented a bunch of things, because in the Dark Ages, we really fell from everything. Knowledge, equal rights, a bunch of shit happened for the 500 years in the Dark Ages. But we started to re-find ourselves after the Dark Ages, rebuilding our lives And psychology at the beginning of that was considered a pseudoscience. Now we pretty much understand that psychology is like legit, just as we will rediscover that astrology is legit, because astrology was considered a science. The best astrologers 2,000 years ago were also mathematicians, astronomers, scientists. It was all correlated. And they were the ones who made the biggest discoveries. Okay, so when I'm looking at Placidus and the fact that it came out of this 17th century, almost after these dark ages energy, and that's what we started to use, you did start to see this kind of booming understanding of the human mind in a different way than we would have looked at it before. And that I really do believe carries with Placidus because of the importance set on the unconscious to conscious mind divide with the rising, and our purpose, our zenith purpose between the 9th and the 10th house. The 9th being our higher learning and higher consciousness, meaning with our career, creates this point above our head that really is the middle of the sky. So Holstein is not what I'm going to use to explain anybody's purpose, to show anybody their drive. I will not use Holstein for anything psychological, and I've tried, and it just doesn't work. You can't see a lot of very important things psychologically and spiritually in the native's chart. However, people who are adamant about Holstein might disagree. One thing I've noticed, and this is just what I've noticed, so if this is not you, please do not be personally offended by this, but you could explain in the comments why you are not this if you want to. A lot of people who like Holstein, I've noticed, are men or women with a lot of masculine energy, more on the masculine side because gender is a construct. So they're more masculine, or men, or younger people. And the reason why younger people really like it is because it's much more cut and dry, and younger people aren't really getting into people's psyche, nor do they give a shit about the psychology of another person. They're looking for things like predicting events, predicting your events, understanding how the transits work. And a lot of masculine astrologers are into it in the same way. They're not trying to dig deep down inside of you, they're trying to figure out what's going on around you. That's why a lot more astrologers up until recently, the famous ones, were men. Very recently, it's been more female-led. But you cannot read the sole purpose of a person with Holstein. You just can't. You can't see what makes them tick. You can't see what inner drives that they have, but you can see if they're intelligent. You can see what they're gonna do with their life. You can see a lot of very important things in Holstein, and it's easier. So there you go. Also, a lot of old techniques that we have recently discovered are Holstein. And so I just did a video on Time Lords, and you definitely should use Holstein. Definitely, if you want to. It just makes more sense as far as following your year goes. First, second, third, fourth, fifth house. So you can watch that video if you're interested in it. Now, something that is very Holstein, and it's been used by Holstein astrologers for a really long time, are horoscopes, like cosmopolitan horoscopes or any sort of horoscope you're going to read on YouTube. You see, what they're going to do when they give you your monthly or yearly horoscope is they're going to open up the Holstein chart as it is, and they're going to put Pisces right at the first house if you're a Pisces rising, or Taurus or Libra or Aries, whatever it is. Sorry, I just always think about myself. Okay, so they're going to put that right at the first, and they're going to say this is for all Pisces, all Tauruses, all whatever. If I'm a Pisces rising, that is what I should be looking at, not my sun, because it's not sun sign astrology here. This is then rising. This is where the transits are hitting in the Pisces energy. So if I have a late degree rising, which I do, this would mess up everything looking at my rising if I only were sticking to the idea of Placidus. And that's not what the astrologer is doing when they're giving the predictions. They are looking at what is falling into the natural Holstein house. So that's another thing that makes it kind of a little bit more basic, and why not all those horoscopes, Cosmo horoscopes, or YouTube horoscopes are going to be the most accurate as far as what your life goes. But the energy of it is probably really good if you follow it by the rising. All of a sudden you're gonna be like, oh, this is exactly what's happening. Because if you're like, say you're an Aries rising and the astrologer is like, so the sun is going to be in your third house of siblings and community and communication. You're going to probably spend a lot of time communicating with other people and spending time with your siblings, maybe. I've seen people talk like that, like on YouTube, and it's so simple and anybody can do it. You just open up your whole sign and you see that, oh, the sun's going to be in my third house. That's the house of siblings and communication. I've literally seen so many YouTube astrologers say that, like, just, oh, the sun's going to be in your seventh house, so this is going to be a focus on relationships, because the seventh house is relationship, and because they're using Holstein. It just becomes very simple. Anybody can do it. So I get it. Like, it's a very good gateway drug, and it's perfectly fine if that's where you want to stop, because there are techniques you can use with Holstein to make stuff happen. If you're going to try to tell somebody that they have a planet that in Placidus or equal sign would be in their 12th house, and now in Holstein is in their first, you are really kind of changing their entire psychological energy of unconscious and hidden ideas and bringing that into the first house of right up in front of their face, which I think can be a little bit damaging, to be honest. But I don't think that everybody's looking for that, and that's okay. That's not what their journey is, and so that's fine if you're into Holstein and looking at it like that. If your journey is more of trying to get to the root and the soul and the core purpose of another person, and you really do want to see what lies around the middle of the sky, what lies in the Immoncoli, the bottom of the sky, and at the ascendant and the descendant, what goes underneath. I've noticed a lot of people in Placidus have their moon 5 degrees underneath the descendant, which in Placidus would be their 6th house, which makes a lot of sense. There's a very dark shadow period here. That's not something you can read as much when you get into Holstein, but it's not something that someone who is using Holstein is actually looking for at the same time. So if you are into transits, horoscopes, basic understanding of what somebody should do with their life, showing how their life is followed, and actually generally trying to just appear as intelligent as possible, use Holstein. But if you want to get down to the depth or the deeper areas of somebody, I think it'd be very foolish not to use Placidus. I wanted to add, because I didn't say this, but the biggest thing I think here is, and why you can very easily see that this is psychological, is because when you are shifting the houses around and you're changing the degrees of them, you are pinpointing certain individual characteristics of that person, where in Holstein the houses don't matter and they don't explain. I mean, they matter, but they don't matter as much. They don't explain based on degrees where they're falling, what that means. Therefore, if you have a Pisces rising like me, you are the same in the houses. All your houses are exactly the same. And that doesn't make as much sense when you break it down in Holstein. Again, though, you're just not looking for that. You're not looking to see the difference. And that's the thing. So it's like you have to look at that within yourself. If you do Holstein, you have to be honest and say, yeah, I'm not looking for that big difference in that house between you and another person with the same rising sign. I'm not. But in Placidus, you would be. It would be an important indicator of a lot of different things. And so I just think that's something that I wanted to say. Those are my interpretations, my understanding after studying for 13 years. That is what I see. Thank you guys. Talk to you. Bye.